Hello and welcome to the Emerging Consciousness Global Online Festival, a kaleidoscope of voices and perspectives on awakening. Here we are gathering with transformative coaches, visionary artists, cultural creatives, an eclectic mix of wisdom keepers blended with colorful new voices in order to create a catalyzing space where curious people can come for fearless and experiential learning. So thank you for being a part of this, this event to liberate consciousness, supercharge our minds, and activate the farthest reaches of human potential so that we can co-create a more peaceful and evolved world.
Wow. That was such a great intro.
Hi, you're meeting Karen. I love it. I'm going to introduce her to you. I am Tami Mensh, and I'm a transformative life and spiritual business coach. I'm the founder of Kaleidoscope Lounge and Coaching and creator and host of this event. And I serve brave souls that are on a journey to fullness of expression, joy, authenticity, and deep wisdom. Those brave souls who sense that change is imminent and long to connect with what makes them feel more fully alive and the gifts that they were born to bring into this world. And if you've been listening to any of these other interviews, then you might have heard me say that before. And each time I meet with one of these amazing speakers or amazing clients in my life, I'm reminded of that over and over again. Brave souls. And today I'm here to talk with you, to introduce you to Karen Barak, one of those brave souls. And listening to this conversation, you'll understand why I say that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I wanted to say that I love kaleidoscope, and I have a very interesting kaleidoscope. Oh, no. Wow. I think that, what you're doing is so important, Tami. Bringing voices that are out there that have something to say, because there are so many people who are waking up and who want to help others wake up too. And waking up is not for the faint of heart. It's not simple. It's not simple. There's a price to pay for remaining unconscious, and there's a price to pay for becoming conscious. And the only question is, which path are you wanting to take? I have always chosen, I don't know if I consciously chose, but I was put on the path of finding consciousness at a very early age. And so I've been a truth seeker and a truth teller, because really, what is consciousness other than telling the truth? And telling the truth more than anything to ourselves. You know what I mean? Telling the truth to ourselves, because we're habituated and taught how not to make other people happy, or to fit in, or to be safe, or whatever the situation is. And when it becomes habituated, when it becomes a pattern of thinking, it destroys us from the inside. If we're unable to stand in our own story, to stand in our own truth, to look at what happened. And that's everything I do, whether it's my music process or an art process or group facilitation or working with clients, or even with myself and with colleagues like you. We have such a special connection because we're both on this path for this reason. And so it's really special for me to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Karen. I've enjoyed our conversations leading up to this, and we both were really excited to do this together today. And Karen is an amazing visionary artist, a catalyst coach, a group facilitator, recovery specialist, and she expresses her courage through music and visionary art and helps others to do the same. So, Karen, why don't you tell us a little bit about um, the topic today that you have picked, which is on taboos. Why what you don't talk about will kill you, and what does that mean to you?
Yes. So before I even begin on that topic, I want to say that nothing I say today is for the intention of hurting anyone in my sphere, in my family, in the world. The intention is only for growth. People would have done better had they known better. So I want to make that clear first. And the second thing that I want to say is that, on taboos, what you don't talk about will kill you. There are many subjects that people don't talk about, and they are killing them. Those things that we keep secrets. There are 12-step programs that say we're only as sick as our secrets. And we know from the field of coaching, from the field of psychology, from the field of trauma, that those places that do not see the light, that do not have a voice, end up killing us, whether it's through Gabor Mate's work. Gabor Mate is an addiction specialist. He's also a person who has, proven scientifically and talked for many, many years about how trauma affects the physical body and causes illness. And, we all know, I mean, how many of us, I was one myself, that my divorce absolutely caused my cancer. People know that when the body is under stress and there is an immune response, the immune system stops working properly when there's that much stress in the body, and it does cause physical illness. So everything that, that I look at has to do with a holistic view. And I was sitting with a group of people last night, and if you're watching, you know who you are. Plus an entire group of people that are in my life that I work with on a regular basis, and you know who you are, who shared with me and encouraged me when I said to them, I'm about to talk about things that are really vulnerable for me. And this is a first exposure for me on such a large platform. And do I really want to talk about this? And, one of the things that you and I had talked about, and one of the things that they brought up to me last night is, look, we all have the nice face. We all have the smile that we can plaster on and all look good on the outside. But what is emerging consciousness if not telling the truth and taking off that mask? Now, these masks were very important for us to survive our lives, but they're masks nevertheless. And if I'm here as what you call the brave soul, which I love, a brave soul, because it does take courage and bravery. And those people last night are some of the bravest souls that I know. And they're willing, like I'm willing, like you're willing, to look at what is going on, what happened to me. So in saying that, I will bring it back to music and art, because music and art, really, music saved my life, gave me the survival skill to live through the kind of life that I had. And, my parents and grandparents were Holocaust survivors. And in honor of them, I speak about this as well, because, we have an idea that somehow when cultural atrocities occur, that it just occurs to the people who were there or who lived through it or who were somehow affected by it, but it doesn't really affect others. And that's not true. That's not true in any sense of the word. And I began, certainly as a child, when we're children, we don't know what normal is. There's no comparison. We're living in a place and we will normalize whatever's happening because we have to. We have to survive. So many of us are actually wounded children in adult bodies. And when we start looking at what does emergent consciousness means, it means looking at that woundedness and looking at the woundedness without blame or shame and creating an enemy as you did that to me, because that doesn't help us move forward. And I'm finding even in my own work and, on many platforms where there's kind of like an enemy, us and them. So in this context where I'm talking about my own personal life, there is no us or them. My parents were not at fault for the Holocaust. My parents were not at fault for being victims of the Holocaust. They were victimized. And in that victimization, they behaved in certain ways. They had to shut down certain feelings. They became unaware of emotions that they couldn't afford to actually feel or deal with. And in that, you can only teach what you know. So to our children, we can only teach what we know. And I lived in a home that was rife with silence, with non-authenticity. You couldn't really be who you are. And in dysfunctional homes, which this was a dysfunctional home, and many, many people tell me who had a healthy, functional family. Most people are living in some kind of dysfunction, but there are rules in a dysfunctional family, and those are don't talk, don't tell, don't trust. And you learn that from a very early age, getting your needs met. Now, I came from a generation, like many of us, where children were to be seen and not heard. Our parents were raised in generations like that. And then they come forward and try and do better, but in essence, end up doing the same because that's really all they know. And so in my home, nobody ever talked about the Holocaust per se. But when I went to my grandmother's home on the weekends, she was stuck on a mountain between Belgium and Switzerland. And she told the story to me every week. And that's when I first saw what post-traumatic stress looks like. I didn't know it at the time. And I always felt a very deep sense of loss, or just something wasn't right. And I really didn't know what that was. But when at the age of 7, I was introduced to the piano. Actually, the story goes that at the age of 3, I would go to the neighbor's house because we had no money, and I would play the neighbor's piano. And then my parents, toiled and saved money and were able to get a piano in our house. And I remember when I got that piano, the thing that came for me was not joy. There wasn't joy in that. There was a deep sense, which I could not really explain, of responsibility. A responsibility to be great. And this is not an unknown part of being the children of Holocaust survivors. This is actually called second generation disorder. A lot of the children of Holocaust survivors were raised with the deep kind of obligation of being everything that their parents couldn't be, making sure that Hitler didn't win. So I became a classical pianist at the age of 7, and I was woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning, because they wanted me to be great, and that's not their fault. But for a child, there's a certain loss of childhood when you're waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're practicing before you go to school. And, I don't want to go into all of that because it really doesn't matter in that sense, other than I was living with the perfectionism and the deep obligation of other people and not of myself. So my authenticity had to be sublimated. I had to put whoever I really was, I just want to go bike riding, underground, right? And there was nobody who I could tell that to because they were doing it for me. And then also, you know, there happened to be some other things that happened in my family of origin, which occurred at an early age, which I really only remembered at a much later age. But many Holocaust survivors, many people in general, when they have a loss of when they feel helpless, they take out that loss of power on beings that are weaker than them. And that's another big thing that so many of my clients, so many people that I know, and myself included, have struggled with. At the age of 7, I was molested by my grandfather. And I don't say that lightly. When I say it with a straight face, as if it happened to someone else, part of that is my disassociation from it so that I can actually continue to speak. For many years, I could talk about it like all of these things happened to someone else. And it took me a long time to understand, no, that actually happened to me. And once that happened, a sort of part of me kind of just became an automaton. I just became a person that went around in the world and did what I was told to do. I got straight A's, I went to school, but I myself had no more access to my own feelings. And I was starved for affection because that wasn't the kind of nature in my house. And because of that also, there was a rage. There was a rage of, why am I not loved? What's wrong with me? What's going on? But so many children live with that. Like, what is happening? Mom is working, not my mother, but in general, you know, a lot of my clients have said to me, you know, my parents worked 2 jobs to put food on the table. And then who raised you? And there's a rage around that. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's not the fault of the parents for wanting to put food on the table. That's their obligation. But a child needs more than just a roof over their head and food. They need nurturing and guidance and care and love. And some of that we don't have the capacity to do when we're raised in dysfunctional homes where that skill wasn't nurtured. And so fast forward, you know, here I am just trying to do whatever, but not really having any idea of who I was. And at the age of 14, I was molested by my uncle. So it was clear that there was this feeling in the family, there was incest in this family. There was a pattern of an abuse of power because incest is not about sex. Incest is about power. Sexual abuse is about power. Rape is about power. And so when that happened, and it happened to be in the same family, that was my first actual kind of budding, emerging sexual experience. And so for many women who go through things like that, sexuality becomes something kicks in, which is to obliterate that sexuality, make it unimportant. So that the understanding that something was taken from you and innocence was taken from you no longer means anything. So women can go one of 2 ways. They can either become promiscuous and then they're open to many more kind of abusive experiences, or they become very heavy so that there's literally a physical barrier so they won't be hurt again. And I did not have a voice. I was not heard. And when it did come to light, I was not believed. And I was blamed for my own abuse. And I say this not to make anyone at fault. I say this because when you speak out, not everybody is capable of hearing. When a person speaks out, if that other person listening has not dealt with their own traumas, has not dealt with their own wounding, they cannot be present for yours. But as a child, I didn't know that. And so what happened is, for me, my music, I was living a double life. I was a classical pianist on the one hand, winning awards on stages, smiling for the camera. And I was a very wounded soul whose internal emotional life was obliterated, and I had nowhere to go with it. And so that rage also caused me to also hurt people, because hurt people hurt people. And I believe that when I was molested by my uncle, it set off a series of events that continually put me in an abusive situation. And that pattern of abuse was now conflated. Love and abuse became conflated. And so many of the people that I work with talk about the inability to understand when they look at, well, yeah, my father beat me and I had to hide under a bed, but I know he loved me. When you hear that objectively, you know that that is not love. Love is kind, love is compassionate, love is open, love is giving, love is generosity. And when we are impressionable as children, as young adults, as teens, and we're growing, we can only become what we are taught. And when that pattern is repeated consistently over and over and over again, that becomes the pattern of our life. So musically, I started writing. I started writing music. And that, Tami, was the first place that I could tell the truth. And I could tell the truth and play it for other people without saying I'm telling the truth. This is happening to me. And most people in my closed circle were not even paying attention to, like, what are the lyrics, right? Which, if you listen to any musician, if you listen to any meaningful music, you will hear their story in it. And if you're paying attention, then that's a place of connection. And so my place of connection was lyric writing and music writing, which is how I even got to Cultivate and Create, which is lyric writing for the process of healing. Yeah, boy, that was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm taking it all in, and I think that, you know, I'm feeling it, you know, through all of the cells in my body that going through that whole journey with you. And, you know, speaking of these taboos and putting it out
Correct.
there as a way to heal. And, you know, there's so much to unpack in that.
Right.
And the you know, the learning that came from me, you know, from that Holocaust survivors, you know, your sympathy goes to them. You don't, you see them as victims, and very rarely do we consider, you know, what happens to the next generations and how did their trauma, you know, manifest, and how could they be, you know, the perpetrators of molestation and right. And harm, and how that translates into that, transmutes
Well,
to that.
yeah, I think that, the paradox that we are all in many ways both victims and perpetrators. We are both victimized and we survive. And the thing that is the most important to me whenever I speak with people, or when I, on my journey, is to really be able to understand that we are heroes. If we have survived, we are heroes. And yes, we will find ways. Gabor Mate was one of the most influential people in my life. There were a few really influential people in my life in terms of my own healing journey. So I will say that the first one was at the United States Holocaust Museum. They have a luncheon every year to raise funds. And I can never go to these things because I just can't watch anything Holocaust. I can't do, it's too painful for me. But this particular year I decided to go, and there was a writer, her name is Mindy Wiesel, and she wrote this book called The Daughters of Absence. And I got there early. I thought it was like a little author's luncheon with maybe 30 women. It was 4,000 people. And I bought the book and I went and I sat at a table and I started reading, and I started bawling, because what she was saying is the daughters of so many Holocaust survivors could only find their voices through the arts, poetry, sculpture, music, because we couldn't speak the unspeakable. We couldn't voice what we were experiencing. Rebecca Solnit said to be rendered voiceless is to be dehumanized. And to suffer in silence is to suffer without recourse. When you can't say what is happening, you spend your life in suffering. And I suffered for many, many, many years without the understanding that, wait, this was my path. So part of what I want to say is, for a long time I said, why was I raped? Why was I, why? There are a lot of people that I know that will say why. And believe it or not, I had to come to the understanding, and this is hard for me to say, that for whatever you believe, whether it's, you want to call it higher power, God, Allah, Jesus, Buddha, creative intelligence, universal spirit guide, whatever you want to call that, I had to believe that the energetic universe wanted to set me on a course of consciousness. And that the only way that it could get me out of that family and out of that pattern was to cause something so painful that I would set out on that course. Of course, my entire reason for being for many, many years was to heal my family. I attempted and I attempted and I attempted. And for many people out there, if you're listening, in a dysfunctional family, there are always roles. There's the golden child and the lost child and the mascot who makes jokes, and then there's the scapegoat. The scapegoat is generally the truth teller, and nobody wants to hear the truth in a system that is dysfunctional. And it doesn't matter whether it's your family or your workplace or the political system. When somebody speaks out, not everybody wants to hear. And yet, our only real, authentic self is the one that tells the truth. So really emerging consciousness can only be telling the truth. So after I saw Mindy Wiesel, then I started looking at some other people like Dr. Rachel Yehuda. She was at Mount Sinai. And, this brings me like way into the close past. It's like, this is a long journey. I'm 59 almost, right? But She did the study of epigenetics on Holocaust survivors, American Indians, and Vietnam veterans. And through the study of epigenetics, she understood and discovered, although there was work prior to that, she was the first one who discovered that the trauma of the Holocaust, the trauma of the American Indian cultural obliteration, the trauma of Vietnam veterans coming back can be transmitted on a DNA level to their offspring. So that gave me the understanding of, oh my gosh, I was actually born with the PTSD of the war without a war of my own. And then I had to study PTSD. Well, what is PTSD? And I always knew that I had PTSD, but what does that mean? Well, then I studied the work of Gabor Mate and Dr. Bruce Lipton, and I studied Joe Dispenza, and I studied the autonomic nervous system, and I understood that, PTSD is the way that we involuntarily protect ourselves from threat or perceived threat. Well, that worked great in caveman days. You saw a lion, run, fight, fight or flight or freeze, hide. But when the lion is your mother or your boss or traffic, and that perceived threat is coming at you, your nervous system acts the same way. And when it's habituated to consistently be in that fight, flight, freeze mode, and there's a fourth one called fawn, which is codependence, which is much more modern.
Spawn, did you say?
Fawn, yeah, that came from Pete Miller's complex PTSD from surviving to thriving. Because there are two types of PTSD. One is that an event over a short period of time, and one, many events, small events. So there's a big event over a short period of time, PTSD. Many events over a long period of time, complex PTSD, where the root, you can't even find the root anymore. It's just a behavioral pattern. But understanding how that affects the nervous system and keeps us hypervigilant, always on edge, always ready to fight, that makes it much more simple for people to understand why they're so enraged, like why they go from 0 to 100 in a millisecond and they feel like they can't do anything in the middle, like how to stop it. When you understand the nervous system and that response is involuntary, and that the only way to interrupt it is through the breath. Through the breath. And people say, well, I don't know how to meditate, and it's hard for me. It's not hard for anybody to breathe. When you have an understanding, oh, this is how I pay attention. And so, of course, I went to, Vipassana retreats, 10-day silent meditation, and I went inward, and that was so hard. And I had to look at the real stories. I had to understand that I was a traumatized child. I was a traumatized human being. But I don't have to look at that or blame anybody for that. It wasn't their fault. If they would have known better, they would have done better. And maybe they could have gotten some help, but it was not in their generation to do that. So does that mean I remain in that pattern and then continue to do that to my children, to my child who was 26? I'm sure he'll have plenty to say about how I screwed him up, right? Because none of us are perfect. But how do I get back to who I really am? And so my art process, which you see behind me, is based on the idea of collecting fragments. A lot of us believe that we're broken, but I don't believe that we're broken. I believe that we are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, and that our bodies and brains did exactly what they needed to do to protect us. And when we can take enough breath, when we can summon enough bravery, when we can take courage and look, then we can collect all of those pieces and make something so beautiful out of them. that's really how I started that process, because 30 years ago, I took a big mirror and I said, well, if I'm screwed up, well, how am I going to fix that? And I took it to the third floor and I put it in a bag and I dropped it from the bag and I broke it into a million pieces. And I say, well, is this broken? Can I make something beautiful out of it? And that's how the whole idea for me began. And so I work with people who, through coaching, they go inside and they look with bravery, not at what's broken, but what was right about everything they did. What was heroic about who they are and how they survived? What was the story? And say it out loud. We don't need to blame anybody. Blaming doesn't help because the wound is still there. I remember a story of a client of mine whose father was in the Vietnam War, and he wore a necklace. He saw a picture of his father with a necklace of human ears around it. Now, what does that do to a child seeing an image like that and living through the rage of this father? Is the father at fault? No, the father served his country. The father went to war. The father did his very best to survive under the circumstances, came back and tried to reintegrate into a society that didn't really help him. Is that his fault? No. Is it this client's fault that was his father's experience? No. Did he deserve more than the inability to nurture him? Yes. Was a wound created? Yes, a wound is created. Does it matter whose fault it is? No. What matters is, let us examine the wound. Let us objectively look at it. Let us grieve it. Let us allow it to be there. Let us embrace it, and let us let it go and integrate it into who we have become. Man, that was a mouthful, Tami.
Oh, I'm taking it all in, and I just appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability in sharing such deep truths in an authentic way. The truth
I'm
telling.
trying.
Truth telling, you're doing it. And in all of these stories, what you're about the soldier, about you, about your grandparents, it's like keeps coming up for me is how each one can be seen as victim, villain, or hero.
That's exactly right.
And so we, and how are we, and then you take we all can be all of those things. And how you took those pieces, and put them in that trash bag, right? And threw it off the balcony, and all the parts, maybe and put them together in a different way, a new way, in a beautiful way. And just, I want to see the art behind you just a little bit better. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Can you see that?
I can. Yeah. Yeah.
That piece is called The Perpetuation of Hostage Hearts.
Hmm.
I should have not told you the title right away, because I always like hearing like what people see. So some people have seen like angel wings or an extraterrestrial, or like, I don't know, what do you see right now?
I mean, to me, it looks like a heart with wings.
A heart with wings.
That kind of is resonating out and up.
Yeah.
It looks like Phoenix, from the ashes.
That's beautiful. I love that. This is actually the story of a woman who I worked with, and it's my story as well. Those are actually bloody hands.
Oh.
Holding the heart. And the pieces of mirror that are on there are the energy of the crushed heart falling into almost a sea of people that are watching. So many people today, their abuse is in plain sight, but we don't call it out for what it is. And then what happens is energetically, it continues. So you could see the energy going, you know, in a continual circle, because it is generational. Generational trauma is real. And until there's a person in the family who stands up and says, no more, not for me, that's what takes courage, because I guarantee you that there are so many people. In fact, I just saw the Netflix series on Scientology. Leah Remini was on there, and she left Scientology, which is a very, you know, very punitive kind of cultish type of religion, and what it took to get out of there. The scapegoating that happened to her sister, who said something is wrong here. She was alienated from her family. So many people are ostracized and alienated and scapegoated and removed from their clan or their family or their tribe or their people or their friends in a kind of mob mentality. When you speak out, that has to change. That has to change. I've dedicated my life to changing that, because for me, I am the scapegoat of my family. I am ostracized. It's just the truth. And I've made peace with that. It hurts, but I've made peace with that, because it's not, I've spent my life trying to fix my own family of origin, and most of us cannot do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. And it was never our job. That's the other part. So many wounded children in adult bodies believe that if they just try a little harder, if they just say the right thing, if they just read the right book, if they just approach it appropriately, that they can make a difference. And for some dysfunctional systems, it's not going to work. The only thing that we can do is actually tend to ourselves, heal ourselves, and through that, help other people heal.
Yeah.
You know, the group last night of people who I was with, they said, you stand and say the word incest. Because I was thinking to myself, do I want to be the person that goes on, you know, in this public place, and the first time that I'm actually talking about my work, do I want to be this person? And they said, but that's your experience. And there's a lot of shame that comes up with that. There's a lot of shame that comes up with that, because, I wish that wasn't my story. But when you said, it's the brave ones who come forward and challenge our paradigm, there's a price for that. This is my price, the price of shame. And I'm releasing this shame on a daily basis by not being afraid to say the words. And that's what the talk on taboos, what you don't talk about will kill you. I have seen people in my practice and in my life, people who have come forward and told out loud, spoken the things that they said they would take to their grave. And those very things were keeping them in cycles of abusive relationships, of addictions, of pornography, of prostitution, of alcohol, of drugs, keeping them imprisoned because they couldn't look at it. Gabor Mate taught me one very, very important sentence. He said, don't ask why the addiction. The addiction works. The addiction, from his perspective, Addictive behavior is any behavior that takes you out of the present moment, brings you temporary pleasure, causes craving for that state that you will engage in even though there are negative consequences to your life that you can't stop. And that you can't stop it. And with that, he was addicted to buying classical CDs. You know, I was addicted to bad relationships. I still am dealing with food addiction. You know, I'm dealing with all kinds of patterns of behavior. And for many of the people, Gabor Mate said, because the addiction worked, look at what worked. So don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. So when I sit with people and they meet me for the first time, they're either terrified, right? Because like, I don't want to talk about anything, Karen. Or they give it a little chance. Because it's not necessary to sit in the story for too long. It's not necessary to sit in the story. It is necessary to take out a magnifying glass and kind of look and say, how did that work for me? How did I use that as a survival tool? How can I integrate it, or do I need to retire it? And so, you know, in the music lyric writing process, I sat recently with a group of 18 people. And I start with doing something called a word sculpture. And I wish I would have made up that word, but I didn't. I got it from a woman named Gabrielle Rico. I met her for literally 2 hours in 1990 something. And she gave me her book, which was about creative writing and prompting and how to use certain techniques. And she talked about word sculpture. So I begin with the idea of a word sculpture, which deals with the right brain, the creative brain. And I have people, you know, just brainstorm and write all this body of words, right? And then I create, my innovation is to create the left brain portion, which is a mathematical puzzle, because not everybody can deal with this creative, messy, right brain, brainstorming, visually erratic kind of thing, but they can deal with a puzzle, and they can deal with syllables, and they can deal with form and structure. And this is why it works for groups of people, because you have some people this way and some people this way, and both groups get something out of it. And I sat with these people, and the original kind of word that came up was hate and hope. Hate, hope. And from that came out a huge body of words. And then we began telling a universal story. So it wasn't just one person. In fact, that song, that amount of lyrics could not have been created had it not been for that configuration of people in that room with that energy.
Right. That immediacy and spontaneity in that very, very moment. Yeah, I love that.
And so this story emerges, and the story is so powerful. And then I was gifted by the music. And why do I say gifted? Because somebody taught me a long time ago, and I don't remember where it was. Literally, there's nothing new on the planet. Everything is already known, but we find it in consciousness and it comes through us. Somebody told me that there is a river of songs. There's a river of songs, and you as the artist, your job is to go to the river and pick the song. And so when these lyrics, which the song is actually called Stand Up, which is so apropos to me and you right now, Tami. Standing up. I'm standing up, terrified and standing up. You know, the story of what it means to stand up. So it's the story of finding freedom from addiction, finding freedom from patterns of behavior that have enslaved us, becoming free, and then yearning for the slavery again. Why? because it's a pattern that we're familiar with, of family. It feels so familiar. And what that actually, how that affects us. And so the song came out amazing. And the place that I am presently practicing, an addiction treatment center in Florida called The Source, allowed me to go into studio with these people and to record it. And so for all of you here listening to me up until now, first, thank you. When this goes online for all of you guys, I'm going to be giving that as a free gift, because I'm not going to release it until this thing goes online, because that just feels so synchronistic and so right to stand up. This is standing up. Yeah.
Thank you for being such a great example of how closely the gift is tied to the wound and connected to the wound, and how we can, by really looking to see what is true, and being courageous and being able to pull that out and put it into a different form and share it, turn that shame around. And it's inspiring, Karen. You're really, really inspiring. And I really want to acknowledge you, for standing up yourself.
We should play the song, don't you?
I would love to hear it. So
do we have time?
Yeah, if you want to do a preview, a little, for everyone, I think that would be fun. And
well, so of course, knowing me, the perfectionist that I am, I've already prepared it, hoping that maybe I could share it with you, because we didn't actually get to talk about.
You know what? We haven't held anything else back today. Why should we hold that back?
All right, well, so I'm going to try and screen share. Let's see if we can do this. So for all of you out there who might be struggling, for all of you out there who don't have a voice, who want a voice, who are looking for your voice, who are in the process of waking up, who haven't waked up, who want to wake up, let this music enter you. This is a universal song created by many people, not just me. Let it speak to you and let it inspire you. I hope so. Let's see where we're going to go with this.
And we'll end with the end of the song. I think that'll be a beautiful way to close.
Oh, fantastic. But can we, are we coming back on though to say goodbye?
Would you like to?
Fade out.
Fade out, I'm thinking.
Okay.
And leave it with those words, and everyone will have your description and your contact information, so that they will be able to.
KarenBarak.com is my website.
I'll put all those links on your speaker page. And
yeah, perfect. Perfect. So I don't have to talk about any of that. I
learn more from you. Yeah.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because it's people like you who have the courage to stand up and find many voices and say, no, we're not going to do this little, we're going to do this big. We're going to get as many people as I can find. I want to find important voices that are doing things maybe different, maybe deeper, maybe bigger, maybe completely off the wall. Doesn't matter. Something will speak to someone, and I am grateful to you for giving me the opportunity, and grateful for the work that you're doing. And I know that this will not be the last time that we will do something together.
No way, no way. And I love you. I really, really do. Thank you for sharing. And that's what this whole experience has been all about.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
To all of you heroes, you know who you are. This is for you.
Peace is found in high places. From up here I can see it. The ocean, trees, the moon and the breeze. I've been set free. In the quiet I hear my thoughts whispering just one more time. In the muted darkness I feel empty. I feel the choice has been made. From the red to the illuminating light, I stumble and fall, no hope in sight. When will I ever get it right? I'm sick of putting up a fight. Stand up. Struggle is real, trapped in my savage thoughts. I hate the war that's dragging me down in the empty shadows. I feel my hope so close,